attention, consciousness raising, and focus on form. Now, if we want to present some sort of feedback to the child, especially negative feedback, the point of that feedback is to draw the attention of the child or the learner to what mistake has been made and how can it possibly be corrected. So that when the learner is in a similar circumstance using the language or in a similar utterance, is able to produce an improvised structure. This is argued is possible through attention, drawing attention of the child or the second language learner, developing an awareness or consciousness raising on especially the form of the language. Regarding the attention, it is assumed that the more the learner pays attention to the form of the language that is being used and pays attention to the meaning it conveys, the more second language intake will take place. Now remember, over here we are making a difference between input and intake. Input is whatever language is outside there in the environment. Intake means processing the input itself or processing of the language in the mind of the learner. So, Skimmed would say that attention is not of one kind but of two kinds. Number one is noticing. So, noticing is simply a process of bringing a stimuli into attention. So you start paying attention that there is something happening or the utterance that has been given to you is slightly different from what you have said, and this might be the right way of saying things. So simple registration or simply acknowledging this difference is what he calls noticing. This noticing may be voluntary or may be involuntary. So the teacher might make the learner pay attention to it, or the learner himself or herself is deliberately paying attention, or during the conversation the learner just realizes involuntarily that this is the difference. The second type of attention is actually an understanding and awareness of how things happen and how does it all work. So this understanding leads to a regeneralization or reconfirmation of the hypothesis that might be in the mind of the learner. So the learner somehow readjusts the mind, the mental structures of the language that he or she has, and this is what we call understanding and awareness. Now, Skimmed would say that both of these types of attention are useful for the learning of the second language because both of them somehow contribute to the learning of the second language. Noticing is necessary. This is what Skimmed says, and other researchers also say. But Skimmed would say just by noticing, because noticing can lead towards awareness at a later stage. Even just by noticing, it is a sufficient condition for the learners to learn a second language and to change the input of the language into intake. So he said the more noticing takes place, the more intake takes place. That is, the more the language is processed by the learner. Nicholas, with his colleagues, also conducted a research, and he said that for drawing the attention of the learners to a specific recast or some aspect of the language it is important to make it salient. That is, there has to be an additional cue on form so that the learners pay attention to that specific part. For instance, if we think about the example that we talked about before, I go to school tomorrow, and the recast is I will go to school tomorrow. So you must have noticed that when I said I will go to school tomorrow, I emphasized that word so that this is an additional cue for the learner to remember or to notice the difference between his or her utterance and my utterance as a teacher. Now, the question is also how much of the recast that is given to the learner will lead towards the reproduction of accuracy? How much will it help the learners to accurately reproduce what recast or what target-like structure has been given to the learners? Well, that will definitely depend on the learner's development stage. As we said before, if the learner is not at the right development stage to pick up or to correct the error, he or she will not do it. It also will depend upon the length of the recast. If the recast is not of one word or two words, but is a whole structure itself, it might not be possible for the learners to imbibe it so quickly and to transfer it in their working memory. The third is again related to the length of the recast. If the number of corrections made in a given recast are too much, then even it might not be possible for the learners to pay attention to them and to notice all of them together because this is too much of a problem for the working memory.